The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Buckingham Palace as King Charles III stood at his office window, holding a thick legal document. The papers in his hands contained words that no father should have to read about his own son. The royal lawyers had been clear in their assessment. Prince Harry's latest public statements had crossed a line that even the most patient family could no longer tolerate. Sarah Mitchell, the palace's chief legal advisor, sat across from the king's ornate desk. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of concern as she explained the gravity of the situation. The Duke of Sussex had 14 days to respond to what she called the most serious legal challenge the royal family has issued against one of its own members in modern history. The trouble had been brewing for months. Harry's recent interviews and public appearances had included claims that went beyond personal grievances. He had made specific allegations about financial improprieties, security decisions, and private conversations that the palace's legal team determined were not only false but potentially damaging to the monarchy's reputation and functioning. King Charles removed his reading glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than in this moment. He thought back to happier times when Harry was a young boy, full of laughter and mischief, running through these same palace corridors. Now that same child had grown into a man whose words threatened the very institution Charles had dedicated his life to. Protecting the legal document outlined several specific instances where Harry's statements had allegedly crossed into defamation territory. During a recent podcast appearance, the Duke had claimed that palace staff had deliberately leaked false information about Meghan's pregnancy to distract from another royal family member's scandal. He also suggested that certain financial decisions made by the royal household were designed to punish him and his wife for their departure from royal duties. Palace insiders revealed that these weren't spontaneous remarks but part of a calculated pattern. Harry's team had been carefully documenting interactions and conversations from his time as a working royal, building what they believed was a case for systematic mistreatment. However, the royal family's legal team saw this differently. They viewed it as a deliberate attempt to damage the monarchy's reputation for personal and financial gain. The 14-day deadline wasn't arbitrary. Under British law, defamation cases must be filed within a specific time frame, and the palace's lawyers had determined that waiting any longer would weaken their legal position. The clock was ticking, and every day that passed without a retraction or clarification from Harry strengthened the case for formal legal action. Behind the scenes, palace staff were working overtime to document every statement, interview, and social media post that could be relevant to the case. The royal household's communications team had compiled hundreds of pages of transcripts, video recordings, and written statements. Each piece of evidence was carefully cataloged and analyzed by teams of lawyers who specialized in defamation law. The emotional toll on the royal family was evident to those who worked closely with them. Queen Camilla had been seen having hushed conversations with her private secretary about how to handle public appearances during this difficult time. Prince William had canceled several public engagements, citing the need to focus on family matters. Even the usually unflappable Princess Anne had been spotted looking tense during a recent royal engagement. The palace's strategy was multifaceted. Beyond the legal action, they were preparing for a comprehensive public relations campaign designed to counter Harry's narrative. Trusted royal correspondents were being briefed on the palace's position, and longtime staff members who had worked with Harry were being asked to provide statements about their experiences. The international media had begun picking up on the story, with royal correspondents from around the world calling their palace contacts for information. The story had all the elements that made for compelling headlines: family drama, legal battles, and the future of one of the world's most famous monarchies. News outlets were already preparing special coverage, knowing that whatever happened in the next 14 days would be front-page news globally. Meanwhile, in California, Prince Harry's own legal team was frantically reviewing his public statements and preparing their defense strategy. Sources close to the Duke suggested that he was shocked by the formal nature of the legal threat. While he had expected criticism and pushback from his family, he hadn't anticipated that they would be willing to take him to court. The stakes couldn't be higher for both sides. For the royal family, allowing Harry's statements to go unchallenged could set a dangerous precedent, potentially encouraging other family members or former staff to make similar claims. For Harry, a legal defeat could severely damage his credibility and his ability to continue his media career and advocacy work. The deadline also created a race against time for potential mediators. Several high-profile figures, including some who had maintained friendships with both Harry and the royal family, were quietly reaching out to both sides, hoping to find a way to resolve the dispute without it reaching the courts. These behind-the-scenes efforts were complicated by the fact that both sides had already invested significant time and resources in their legal preparations. As the first day of the 14-day countdown came to an end, palace staff were preparing for what could be the most challenging period in the modern royal family's history. The king's evening briefing included updates on media coverage, legal preparations, and security considerations. The royal protection officers had been put on high alert, knowing that family disputes often attracted unwanted attention from protesters and overly enthusiastic supporters on both sides. The document on King Charles's desk wasn't just a legal challenge, it represented a crossroads for the entire royal family. The decisions made in the next 13 days would shape not only Harry's relationship with his family but also the public's perception of the monarchy's willingness to defend itself against attacks from within. The morning sun had set on what many palace insiders privately referred to as the beginning of the end of one chapter in royal history, with no one quite sure what the next chapter would bring. The secure phone line buzzed at exactly 3 a.m. London time, connecting Montecito, California, with a discreet law office in central London. Prince Harry sat in his home office, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups, as his legal team delivered news that would change everything about his approach to the royal family dispute. The palace had filed preliminary paperwork that morning, making their threat of legal action official. Jennifer Walsh, Harry's lead attorney, didn't mince words during the emergency conference call. The royal family's legal team had assembled what she described as an impressive war chest of evidence spanning Harry's public statements over the past 18 months. They had transcripts of interviews he thought were off the record, recordings of public appearances where he had made spontaneous comments, and even social media posts from accounts associated with his charitable foundation. The Duke of Sussex felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the scope of what he was facing. This wasn't just about his recent controversial podcast appearance or his memoir. The royal lawyers had been systematically building a case against him for over a year, documenting every public statement that could potentially be construed as defamatory toward the institution of the monarchy or specific family members. Meghan entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea, her face showing the strain of sleepless nights since the legal threat had arrived. She had been through media battles before, but nothing had prepared her for the possibility of facing her husband's own family in court. The couple had spent the previous evening calling close friends and advisors, seeking guidance from people who understood both the legal and public relations implications of their situation. The most damaging evidence, according to Harry's legal team, centered around his claims about financial manipulation by the royal household. During a charity event 6 months earlier, he had suggested that his father had used financial pressure to force him and Meghan out of their royal roles. The palace's lawyers had documented not only his public statements, but also the financial records that directly contradicted his claims. Palace sources had leaked to trusted journalists that the royal family possessed detailed financial records showing exactly how much money had been allocated to Harry and Meghan's household, including security costs, travel expenses, and staff salaries. These documents allegedly proved that the couple had received more financial support than other working royals. Not less, as Harry had suggested in his public statements, the legal strategy being employed by the royal family was unlike anything seen in recent royal history. Rather than relying solely on traditional palace discretion and behind-the-scenes pressure, They were prepared to use the full force of the British legal system to protect their reputation. This represented a fundamental shift in how the monarchy dealt with family disputes in the public eye. Harry's team discovered that the palace had hired Thompson and Associates, one of London's most prestigious defamation law firms. The firm's senior partner, Sir Richard Thompson, had previously represented major corporations and government officials in high-profile cases. His involvement sent a clear message that the royal family was treating this matter as seriously as any threat to a major business or political institution. The international implications were becoming clear as well. Harry's statements had been covered by media outlets around the world, meaning that any legal action would need to consider defamation laws in multiple countries. The complexity of pursuing a case that spanned British, American, and international media coverage added layers of legal challenges that both sides were still trying to fully understand. Behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, the king was receiving hourly updates on the legal preparations. Palace staff reported that he had cancelled his usual morning walks in the palace gardens, instead spending hours in private meetings with legal advisors, communications specialists, and senior family members. The emotional toll on the monarch was evident to those who worked closely with him. Prince William had emerged as a key figure in the family's response strategy. Sources close to the Prince of Wales revealed that he had been advocating for the strongest possible legal action, arguing that allowing Harry's statements to go unchallenged would encourage further attacks on the family's reputation. His relationship with his younger brother, already strained, appeared to be reaching a breaking point. The 14-day deadline was creating intense pressure on both sides to find a resolution. Several prominent figures who maintained relationships with both Harry and the royal family had begun quietly reaching out to explore potential compromises. These intermediaries included mutual friends from Harry's military service, charitable organizations where he had worked closely with other royals, and even some political figures who understood the broader implications of a public legal battle. Media outlets around the world were beginning to position themselves for what could become the story of the decade. Royal correspondents were dusting off their contacts and preparing for round-the-clock coverage. The British tabloids, in particular, were salivating at the prospect of a legal battle that would provide months of headline material. Harry's charitable work was also coming under scrutiny as part of the legal case. The palace's lawyers had noted several instances where he had used his charitable platform to make statements about the royal family that went beyond personal grievances. They argued that using his philanthropic work as a vehicle for attacking the monarchy represented a particularly serious breach of the understanding that had governed his departure from royal duties. The couple's Netflix deal and book contracts were also being examined by lawyers on both sides. Harry's memoir had already generated significant controversy, but the palace's legal team was now arguing that some of the claims in the book crossed the line from personal memoir into defamatory territory. They were particularly focused on passages that made specific allegations about conversations and decisions that could be proven false through documentation. As the second day of the countdown ended, both sides were digging in for what appeared to be an inevitable legal battle. Harry's team was exploring every possible defense strategy while the palace lawyers continued building their case. The royal family's willingness to pursue legal action against one of their own had shocked even seasoned royal watchers, signaling that this dispute had moved far beyond typical family disagreements. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour, the possibility of a peaceful resolution seemed to be slipping away. The next morning would bring new developments in what was quickly becoming the most serious crisis to face the royal family since the abdication crisis of 1936. The emergency meeting at Clarence House began before dawn, with King Charles facing the most difficult decision of his reign. Around the mahogany table sat his most trusted advisors, including the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Prime Minister's representative, and senior members of the royal household. The question on everyone's mind was whether the monarchy could survive a public legal battle with one of its own members. Archbishop Justin Welby had requested the meeting, After spending a sleepless night considering the spiritual and constitutional implications of the royal family's legal action. As the head of the Church of England, he understood that the monarchy's role as the defender of faith could be seriously undermined by a bitter family dispute played out in the courts. He spoke carefully about forgiveness and reconciliation. While acknowledging the legitimate need to protect the institution, the Prime Minister's private secretary delivered a message that sent shock waves through the room. Downing Street was deeply concerned about the international implications of a royal court case, particularly with ongoing trade negotiations and diplomatic relationships that could be affected by negative publicity surrounding the monarchy. The government was prepared to support the royal family, but they urged caution about the broader consequences. Meanwhile, in California, Prince Harry was dealing with his own crisis of conscience. His military friends had been calling throughout the night, with several expressing concerns about how a legal battle might affect the charitable organizations they had built together. The Invictus Games, in particular, could suffer significant damage if Harry became embroiled in a lengthy court case with his own family. The media frenzy was intensifying by the hour. Outside Buckingham Palace, news crews from around the world were setting up equipment for what they anticipated would be wall-to-wall coverage of the developing story. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades were calling it the most serious crisis they had ever witnessed. The palace's media strategy team was working overtime to manage the narrative while the legal case proceeded. Harry's legal team had made a disturbing discovery during their overnight research. The palace's evidence file included private conversations that Harry had believed were protected by family confidentiality. It appeared that staff members who had been present during family meetings and phone calls had been asked to provide detailed accounts of what was said. This revelation hit Harry particularly hard, as he realized that his own family had been documenting his words as potential evidence against him. The financial implications were becoming clearer as both sides tallied up their legal costs. Harry's team estimated that a full court case could cost millions of pounds, money that would ultimately come from his media deals and charitable work. The royal family's legal expenses would be covered by the sovereign grant, meaning that British taxpayers would be funding a lawsuit against a member of the royal family, a fact that was already generating political controversy. Palace insiders revealed that Queen Camilla had been working behind the scenes to find a peaceful resolution. She had maintained a cordial relationship with Harry even after his departure from royal duties, and several sources suggested that she was serving as an unofficial mediator. Her efforts were complicated by the fact that Harry's public statements had included veiled criticisms of her role in the family and her relationship with King Charles. The international royal community was watching the situation with growing alarm. European monarchies, which had maintained close relationships with the British royal family, were concerned about the precedent being set. If family disputes could escalate to legal action, it could encourage similar challenges to other royal families around the world. Harry's children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, were becoming an unexpected factor in the legal considerations. Both sides' lawyers were having to consider how a public court case might affect the children's future relationship with their grandfather and their place in the line of succession. Child welfare experts were quietly being consulted about the potential psychological impact of such a public family dispute. The evidence being assembled by the palace lawyers was extensive and damaging. They had identified at least 15 separate incidents where Harry's public statements could be considered defamatory. These ranged from suggestions of financial impropriety to claims about racist attitudes within the royal household that could be proven false through documentation and witness testimony. One particularly damaging piece of evidence concerned Harry's claims about security arrangements. He had publicly stated that his family's security had been withdrawn as punishment for their departure from royal duties. However, palace documents showed that security arrangements had been maintained for months after their departure, only ending when Harry and Meghan moved permanently to the United States and refused to coordinate with British security services. Duke's team was also discovering that several of his public statements had been taken out of context by his own supporters, creating a narrative that went beyond what he had actually said. This realization was forcing them to consider whether fighting the case might actually harm Harry's reputation more than accepting some form of settlement or public retraction. British legal experts were divided on the likely outcome of such a case. Some argued that the royal family's evidence was strong enough to win significant damages and a comprehensive retraction. Others suggested that Harry's status as a former working royal gave him some protection under freedom of speech laws, and that many of his statements could be defended as personal opinions rather than factual claims. The palace's decision to pursue legal action was also being influenced by concerns about future challenges. If Harry's statements were allowed to stand without legal challenge, it could encourage other former royal staff members or family members to make similar claims. The monarchy's reputation for discretion and dignity was at stake, and many advisors believed that showing strength now was essential for maintaining respect in the future. As the third day of the countdown concluded, both sides were preparing for what appeared to be an inevitable escalation. The king had authorized his legal team to proceed with formal court filings, while Harry's lawyers were drafting their defense strategy. The window for a peaceful resolution was rapidly closing, and the next 24 hours would determine whether this family dispute would become the most public legal battle in royal history. The British public was beginning to take sides, with polling showing the country almost evenly divided between supporting the royal family's right to defend itself and sympathy for Harry's position as someone who felt forced to speak out about his treatment. This division was creating additional pressure on both sides to find a resolution that wouldn't further damage the monarchy's standing with the people they served. The breakthrough came at an unexpected moment when Princess Anne arrived at Buckingham Palace, carrying a leather briefcase filled with documents that would change the entire trajectory of the legal dispute. The Princess Royal had spent the previous 48 hours conducting her own investigation into her nephew's claims, using her decades of experience in royal protocol and her extensive network of contacts throughout the Commonwealth. King Charles was in the middle of a tense conference call with his legal team when his sister knocked on his office door. Anne's no-nonsense approach to family problems had always been respected by her brothers, and her arrival signaled that she had discovered something significant. The documents she carried contained evidence that could either strengthen the case against Harry or provide him with the vindication he had been seeking. The Princess Royal's investigation had uncovered a series of internal palace memos that painted a complex picture of the events leading up to Harry and Meghan's departure. While some documents supported the palace's version of events, others revealed that certain staff members had indeed been working to undermine the couple's position within the royal family. Anne's findings suggested that the truth lay somewhere between Harry's public claims and the palace's official narrative. In California, Prince Harry received an encrypted message from an unexpected source, his grandfather's former private secretary, who had maintained contact with the family despite retiring several years earlier. The elderly gentleman had been following the legal dispute with growing concern and had decided to share information that could be crucial to understanding the full context of the family's disagreements. The former private secretary's revelations centered around a series of meetings that had taken place in the months before Harry and Meghan's wedding. These meetings, attended by senior royal staff and some family members, had involved discussions about how to manage the couple's growing popularity and media attention. Some of the strategies discussed had indeed involved limiting their public appearances and controlling their access to certain royal privileges. Harry's legal team realized they were facing a much more complex situation than they had initially understood. While some of Harry's claims appeared to be supported by new evidence, others remained problematic and could still result in successful defamation claims by the royal family. The discovery of this additional information meant that both sides needed to reassess their strategies with only 9 days remaining before the deadline. The media pressure was reaching unprecedented levels. Paparazzi photographers were now stationed permanently outside Harry's Montecito home, while journalists from around the world were offering substantial sums of money for any insider information about the legal proceedings. The constant attention was taking a toll on both families. With reports of increased security measures at all royal residences, behind the scenes, several prominent figures were working desperately to broker a peace deal. Lord Guide, the former private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, had been quietly meeting with representatives from both sides. His deep understanding of royal protocol and his respected status within both camps made him one of the few people who might be able to find a face-saving solution for everyone involved. The Archbishop of Canterbury had also intensified his mediation efforts, drawing on his experience in conflict resolution and his spiritual authority within the royal family. He arranged separate meetings with King Charles and Prince Harry, conducting what he privately described as pastoral counseling sessions designed to address the underlying family dynamics that had led to the current crisis. Harry's charitable work was becoming a crucial factor in the potential resolution discussions. Several major donors to his organizations had privately expressed concerns about the impact of a lengthy legal battle on their ability to continue supporting his causes. The Invictus Games Foundation, in particular, was facing questions from international partners about Harry's availability for upcoming events if he became embroiled in court proceedings. The constitutional implications of the case were also becoming clearer as legal scholars and constitutional experts weighed in on the unprecedented nature of the dispute. Some argued that a public legal battle involving senior members of the royal family could damage the monarchy's constitutional role and potentially impact its relationship with Parliament and the Commonwealth nations. Prince William's role in the crisis had evolved significantly over the past few days. Initially supportive of strong legal action against his brother, the Prince of Wales was reportedly having second thoughts about the wisdom of a public court battle. Sources close to William suggested that his wife, Catherine, had been instrumental in encouraging him to consider the long-term implications for their own children and their future relationship with their uncle. The financial markets were beginning to show signs of concern about the royal crisis. Tourism experts estimated that a prolonged legal battle could impact Britain's royal tourism industry, which generates billions of pounds annually. The uncertainty surrounding the monarchy's stability was also affecting the value of companies that held royal warrants or had strong associations with the royal brand. Harry's team made a significant strategic decision to release a carefully worded public statement that acknowledged some inaccuracies in his previous public comments while maintaining his core complaints about his treatment by the royal institution. The statement was designed to open the door for negotiations while not admitting to defamation in a way that could be used against him in court. The palace's response to Harry's statement was swift and measured. Rather than rejecting his overture entirely, they indicated through official channels that they were prepared to consider discussions about resolving the matter without formal court proceedings. This represented the first public sign that both sides might be willing to step back from the brink of a legal battle. Queen Camilla's behind-the-scenes efforts were finally bearing fruit as she managed to arrange a private phone call between her husband and stepson. The conversation, which lasted nearly 2 hours, was described by sources as emotional but constructive. While no agreements were reached during the call, both men reportedly expressed a desire to find a way forward that would preserve family relationships while addressing the legitimate concerns on both sides. As the fourth day of the deadline period ended, there was cautious optimism among those close to both parties that a resolution might be possible. However, the clock was still ticking and significant obstacles remained. The legal teams on both sides had invested considerable time and resources in preparing for court proceedings, and some advisors were warning that backing down now could be seen as a sign of weakness. The international media attention had transformed what began as a family dispute into a global story about the future of monarchy in the modern world. The outcome of the next few days would not only determine Harry's relationship with his family but could also influence how royal families around the world dealt with internal conflicts in the digital age. The urgent meeting at Windsor Castle marked a turning point that no one had anticipated. King Charles had made the dramatic decision to travel to his mother's former favorite residence, seeking what palace insiders described as spiritual guidance, in the place where Queen Elizabeth II had spent her final years. The symbolism was not lost on anyone involved. The king was turning to the memory of his mother's wisdom to navigate the most challenging family crisis of his reign. Prince Harry had made an equally dramatic gesture by boarding a private flight from Los Angeles to London, arriving in British airspace for the first time since the legal threat had been issued. His decision to return home while the 14-day deadline still loomed represented either a desperate attempt to resolve the crisis face-to-face or a calculated move to demonstrate his commitment to finding a peaceful solution. The logistics of arranging a meeting between the two men while maintaining absolute secrecy had required the combined efforts of both their security teams and communications staff. Harry was quietly transported from Heathrow Airport to Windsor Castle using a route that avoided all media attention, arriving at the castle through a private entrance that had been used by the royal family for generations during times of crisis. The reunion between father and son took place in the Oak Room, the same private study where Queen Elizabeth II had conducted her most sensitive family meetings. Both men were visibly emotional as they sat across from each other for the first time in over a year, with decades of shared history and recent pain hanging heavy in the air. Between them, the conversation that followed was unlike any that had taken place between them since Harry's childhood. Without lawyers, advisors, or other family members present, both men were able to speak with an honesty and vulnerability that had been impossible during their previous attempts at reconciliation. Harry later described it as the conversation I had been trying to have for years, while King Charles referred to it as a father talking to his son, not a monarch addressing a former royal. The breakthrough came when King Charles produced a letter that Queen Elizabeth II had written during the final months of her life, addressed to both her grandsons and intended to be opened only during times of serious family crisis. The letter, written in the Queen's distinctive handwriting, contained her reflections on family unity, the challenges of royal life, and her hopes for future generations of the royal family. Reading his grandmother's words together created an emotional moment that transcended the legal and political complexities of their dispute. The Queen had specifically addressed the challenges that Harry might face as a younger son, acknowledging the difficulties of finding his place within the rigid structure of royal tradition, while encouraging him to use his unique position to serve others. However, the letter also contained clear guidance about the responsibilities that came with royal privilege, including the duty to protect the institution that had provided him with his platform and opportunities. Queen Elizabeth II had written about the importance of distinguishing between personal grievances and public criticism, and the potential consequences of allowing private family matters to damage the monarchy's ability to serve the Commonwealth. The revelation of the letter's existence had been kept secret by King Charles, who had promised his mother that he would only share its contents during a genuine crisis that threatened the family's unity. Harry was deeply moved by his grandmother's words, later admitting that reading her letter helped him understand how his public statements had been perceived by other family members. The two men spent several hours discussing not only the immediate legal crisis, but also the underlying issues that had led to their estrangement. King Charles acknowledged that some palace staff had indeed worked against Harry and Meghan, while Harry admitted that some of his public statements had gone beyond acceptable criticism and had caused real harm to the family's reputation. The most significant outcome of their meeting was the framework of an agreement that could resolve the legal dispute while addressing both sides' concerns. Harry would issue a comprehensive statement acknowledging inaccuracies in some of his previous public comments and expressing regret for any harm caused to family members or the institution of the monarchy. In return, the palace would commit to a transparent review of the events surrounding Harry and Meghan's departure, with findings to be shared with the couple. The agreement also included provisions for Harry's future public statements about his royal experiences. While he would retain the right to discuss his personal journey and struggles with royal life, he would commit to avoiding specific allegations against family members or claims about institutional impropriety that he could not substantiate with evidence. Prince William's involvement in the resolution process became crucial during the final hours of negotiation. The Prince of Wales joined the meeting at Windsor Castle via secure video link from Kensington Palace, participating in what sources described as the most honest conversation the brothers had shared in years. While their relationship remained strained, both men expressed a commitment to rebuilding their connection for the sake of their families and their shared dedication to charitable work. The financial aspects of the resolution were also addressed during the negotiations. Harry agreed to donate a substantial sum to a charity focused on supporting military veterans, an amount that would demonstrate his commitment to making amends while supporting a cause close to his heart. The palace, meanwhile, agreed to cover certain legal costs that Harry had incurred during the dispute, recognizing their role in allowing the situation to escalate. The media strategy for announcing the resolution required careful coordination between both sides' communications teams. They needed to present the outcome in a way that allowed both parties to maintain dignity, while making clear that the legal threat had been withdrawn, and future public statements would be more carefully considered. Queen Camilla played a crucial role in the final stages of the negotiation, serving as a bridge between father and son and helping to address some of the personal grievances that had complicated their relationship. Her perspective as someone who had joined the royal family later in life and understood the challenges of adapting to royal protocol proved invaluable in finding common ground. As the fifth day of the deadline period drew to a close, the framework for resolution was in place, but significant details still needed to be finalized. Both legal teams were working through the night to draft the formal agreements that would end the threat of court action. The world's media remained unaware that the crisis was nearing resolution, with most still predicting an inevitable legal battle that would dominate headlines for months to come. The emotional toll of the week's events was evident on all participants. King Charles appeared visibly aged by the stress of potentially taking legal action against his own son, while Harry looked exhausted from the pressure of fighting his family while trying to protect his own reputation and charitable work. The resolution offered hope for healing, but everyone involved understood that rebuilding trust and family relationships would take much longer than resolving the immediate legal crisis. The morning of the 13th day brought an unexpected sense of calm to both Buckingham Palace and the Montecito home where Prince Harry had spent sleepless nights preparing for what he thought would be an inevitable court battle. The joint statement released at precisely 9 a.m. London time caught the international media completely off guard, announcing not just the resolution of the legal dispute, but a comprehensive framework for future family relations. The statement, carefully crafted by teams from both sides, acknowledged that serious concerns had been raised on all sides while confirming that the Duke of Sussex and the royal family have reached an understanding that addresses these concerns without the need for legal proceedings. The language was diplomatic, but clear. Harry had stepped back from his most damaging claims while the royal family had acknowledged that mistakes had been made in how his departure was handled behind the scenes. The final 48 hours of negotiations had been intense and emotional. Princess Anne had emerged as an unexpected mediator, using her reputation for straight-talking to help both sides face uncomfortable truths about their own contributions to the crisis. Her blunt assessment of the situation, that both Harry and the palace had behaved badly and needed to focus on Solutions rather than blame had helped break through the last barriers to agreement. The specific terms of the resolution went far beyond what most observers had expected. Harry's public apology was comprehensive, acknowledging that several of his statements about financial arrangements and family communications had been based on incomplete information and expressing sincere regret for any distress caused to family members. However, the palace's acknowledgement was equally significant, admitting that improvements in communication and support were needed for all family members. The establishment of an independent review process, to be conducted by Lord Guide and chaired by the Archbishop of Canterbury, represented a genuine commitment to learning from the crisis. This review would examine not just the events surrounding Harry and Meghan's departure, but the broader question of how the royal family supported its members in adapting to changing roles and public expectations. Queen Camilla's role in facilitating the final agreement had been crucial but largely invisible to the public. Her private meetings with both her husband and stepson had helped address some of the personal grievances that had made compromise difficult. Sources close to the Queen Consort revealed that she had drawn on her own experience of joining the royal family under difficult circumstances to help both men understand each other's perspectives. The financial settlement was structured to benefit charitable causes rather than either party personally. Harry's commitment to donate £2 million to military veterans charities was matched by a royal family pledge to establish a new foundation supporting young people transitioning out of public service. The symbolism of both sides contributing to causes larger than themselves helped frame the resolution as being about service rather than self-interest. Prince William's evolution during the crisis had been remarkable to those who witnessed it. The Prince of Wales had moved from being the strongest advocate for legal action to becoming a key facilitator of the resolution. His final conversation with Harry, conducted privately at Kensington Palace on the 12th day, had addressed not just the immediate crisis but their long-term relationship as brothers and future leaders of the Commonwealth. The international implications of the resolution were immediately apparent. Commonwealth leaders, who had been privately expressing concern about the royal family's internal disputes, welcomed the news with relief. The successful resolution demonstrated that the modern monarchy could adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential dignity and unity. The media reaction was mixed but generally positive. Royal correspondents who had been preparing for months of court coverage found themselves instead analyzing a sophisticated approach to crisis management that prioritized family healing over public vindication. Some commentators noted that the resolution showed both sides had learned from previous royal crises, particularly the handling of Diana's death and the initial response to the abdication crisis.